the Ross Center. Can you hear me?
What about this one? Can you hear me on this one?
No.
No?
Not really.
It was. That's a green. That's a green.
Ah, yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's great to see all of you here. Great to see old friends here. It's a privilege every year to host this. So thank you for having this meeting here. You know, the DC is known for city which overreacts, at least in recent past. So it was a little nerve-wracking last night when the building started to close, but I'm so glad all of you are here, and I'm guessing things worked out today. So this is a wonderful week for all of us, and because many things related to transport happens, we get to host this meeting with a lot of our partners. So I'm glad you're here. Looking forward to the discussion, and hope that we are able to keep up the rest of the week all the way to the end of TT. So preserve your energy. That's what I'm saying. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks very much, Annie.
Thank you, Amy. I'm Amy Kenyon, Senior Program Officer at the Ford Foundation and Chair of the SLoCaT Board for now. We'll talk about board elections. I want to welcome you all as well. It's so nice that so many of you could make it. Usually we think about, okay, who is the most jet lagged as we kick off this week. Now I think this time there's also being added who had the most difficult travel due to the snowstorm yesterday. So it's a special big appreciation to all of you for being here, and to WRI for hosting us, even though their building is technically closed today. So not even a big snowstorm seems to be able to deter SLoCaT's ardent supporters. This is our first annual meeting after what was really quite a big transition year. As you know, Corny stepped down from the Secretary General role last year, and Holger agreed to step into the interim Secretary General role. Holger's here somewhere. Yes.
Who is that?
Thank you, Holger. And as you know, the board spent some time going through a thorough recruitment process. And so I'm so thrilled to be able to introduce to you in person today our new Secretary General, Marusha Kardama, this evening. And the thing that I most wanted to say as we kick off, I know you probably all come to this meeting because it's the kickoff of Transport Week, and because there's wine, and because we get to gather and see friends at WRI. But the truth is, your input in these annual meetings as members is incredibly important. And I wanted to really stress how important the input that you gave last year was to the Transition Committee as we kicked off a search for the next Secretary General. And the feedback that you gave us about SLoCaT strategic direction really informed the kind of leader that we were looking to recruit. And I think I can say very positively that we found in Marusha. Those of you who don't already know her, please take a chance to grab her and get to speak with her during the reception. I can really say what a pleasure it's been to get to work with you, Marusha, as your board chair, your collaborative leadership style, and the confidence that she's very quickly built from the entire board, as well as so many very important SLoCaT members and supporters, has been really remarkable. So this is an auspicious moment to kick off a year of renewal and a new SG for SLoCaT. I think we have some people on the phone, so we may want to figure out how to mute.
Can we mute? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, if you're dialing in.
Perfect.
But we have technology.
Great. Thank
Shut them. We did that to
Mute them.
during the board meeting. So 2019, as well as a year of renewal, is also our 10-year anniversary as SLoCaT. And we've come a long way. We have a lot to celebrate, including the growth of SLoCaT from some of the original, you could say, Bellagio pioneers, some of whom are here with us, to today with more than 90 members and a truly expert staff team who gathered this weekend for a retreat here in DC. So we're looking forward to celebrating the SLoCaT founders, including, of course, Corny later this year. And so glad that one of our founding members, Michael, is here. He'll kick off our 10-year anniversary celebration with some remarks at our reception and toasting our SLoCaT as we enter our 10th year. Last thing before I turn it over quickly to Marusha, we'll be handing it back and forth as your MCs tonight. Board elections are coming up later this year. We'll kick off the process in April. Marusha will speak more about the timeline, but I want very much for all of you to be thinking about members and supporters of SLoCaT to nominate. Really want to get full participation from our membership in the process in this sort of period of refreshment for SLoCaT in terms of its strategic goals and our global brand. So that's all I'll say for now, and turn it over to Marusha.
Thanks very much, Amy. So I know that a good number of you don't have met. I had the opportunity of reaching out to a good number of our members in these past few months and meet quite a lot of people at COP. But I acknowledge that I have not had the opportunity of reaching out to all of you. So thank you very much for making the effort to coming all the way here. You might be wondering why somebody who does not have any technical background on transport decided to join this community and decided to join SLoCaT. So instead of introducing myself with a very long presentation of my CV, I thought I would quickly address perhaps 3 questions. The first is, why now? Why after 70 years of professional career in the field of cities, in the field of sustainable urban development, I decided to change? Why I decided to pick up transport as that area of change, and why SLoCaT? Why now? Because after quite some years of setting up agendas at the UN level and pushing, for instance, for the SDG 11 to be part of the set of entities, I thought that it was really time to move from purely agenda setting to implementation. And I really was looking to mix the different families. If we had to talk SDGs, which is the modern speech right now, my aspiration was to try to mix the different families that are behind the different SDGs. Why transport? I actually thought that transport could help me to do that. Because besides being a technical topic in itself, with all its strength, is an interconnector. It's a driving force for those integrated approaches and for that systemic view of systemic change. Something else that also fascinated me about transport was that it is not just about the immediate change that we do tomorrow. Systemic change is transformational, and therefore has that long-term perspective that I was really keen on working. And then I had never actually touched upon transport technically, but over my years of service as a local government official in Spain and in the UK, my dossiers were always sustainability, low carbon economy. So I had a proxy to how transport is part of all that, a critical driver and a physical element for that change. Last, why SLoCaT? I am not completely alien to SLoCaT. I've saw the birth of SLoCaT through all the years. I was in Rio +20 when those amazing commitments were put together by all of you and that big press conference and that big launch. Over the years of process throughout for the Sustainable Development Goals and for the New Urban Agenda, I had the pleasure of actually working quite closely with some of the members of the transport community who were part of the advisory committee of the coalition called Comunitas that I set up with the generous support by the Full Foundation. And very specifically, there's a gentleman over there called Ramon Cruz, with whom I had the opportunity of working over the years, and with Courtney as well, because Comunitas was carrying some messages of SLoCaT and vice versa. So I had not been part of SLoCaT inside directly, but I was not completely alien to who you were, who was Courtney, who was the team, and what was the mission. So this is who I am, and for me, it's fascinating to have this opportunity. I'm very grateful to the board, of course, for having put their eggs in this basket. I'm very appreciated for that, and I also understand that what we're doing now is just, moving on from a very, very important pile of success stories and impact that we had over the years, and how we carry that forward in an operating context that is a bit different. So that's very much what I wanted to share with all of you. I also wanted to remind you, if you look at your tables, you have a paper like this, don't you? And in the email that we sent you a couple of days ago, we told you that there would be homework. So that piece of paper there and the post-its describe a bit the homework. Last year, I understand that the feedback you provided, as Amy was telling us, was crucial, really, to inform the board's decision on recruitment process and transition process. I would like to benefit from your experience of the partnership and your experience as individual members to do that. So over the course of the next 2 hours, whenever there's a thought around those 4 questions, please use the post-its, using the color coding, and then the team will be creating a gallery of post-its while we are at the reception that will be placed there, so we can all take a gallery walk as we would like to. So with no further ado, because we really need to move, isn't it, a bit into the agenda. What the team is going to do now is going to present to you a bit of highlights here and there. But I don't know if Amy, you would like to perhaps get a sense first of who's in the room, who's who, for my benefit, because you all know each other. So I'm the new one here, and we have a fun game to play, isn't it? To get a sense of who's in the room, and then the team will come and start telling to you the beautiful things they've been doing, to which I cannot take any credit because it was actually them under the smart leadership of Corny and Holger over last year. Thank you.
We're going to turn it over to the team in just a minute here to kick off with their highlights. Normally we go around and do introductions, and that takes 45 minutes, and we're not going to do that today. Sorry. But we would like to know who's in the room, and so we have a quick, by show of hands, or maybe even stand up, depending on your level of enthusiasm, would like to know your favorite, your preferred mode of sustainable transport. And then we will spend just like a quick 5 minutes or less giving you a chance to introduce yourselves at your tables, if you hopefully just so quickly you know who's at your table and who you're answering your homework questions with. By show of hands, or stand up or jump up and down if you're really that passionate about buses. Anybody, your favorite mode of buses? Yay! You can stand up more than once, because you might jump up for bicycles too. I know.
I'll put a hand up for buses. Important journey extender.
Okay, yes, EV buses. Okay, train. Yes, we have some train people. Okay, horseback. Walking. Yay! And bicycling. Yay! Do e-scooters count? Somebody online. Yeah, online we have enthusiasm for bicycling. Balloon, hot air balloon.
Sure.
What if, sure. Sure. Okay. What am I missing? Motorcycle?
Trottinette. You know, trottinette. The electronic.
Yes, and then e-scooters or e-bikes. We're fighting a lot about those right now in New York. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Michael. Great. Thank you. So while the team switches over to its presentation, I want to just give you 3 minutes to go around your tables and please introduce yourselves, and you can fight about your favorite form of transportation. You pick it up whenever you
Been on a project.
Give them 1 more minute. I'm going to say that.
This group
I'm from Romania. I don't speak English. Because I was living away. I live here. I do truck companies.
Yep.
The truck industry is more sustainability and all the transportation.
Yeah, just this is the foundation which is separate from but we can't
So perhaps I can ask you to wrap it up. So in the interest of time, since we have more time afterwards, I do want to acknowledge that we have more people joining us. You cannot hear me. You read green. I'm a Spaniard. I can't project my voice. Can you hear me better? No. Let me try the other one. Where's the other one? Let's see. What about now? Yeah, this one is the one that's working. Excellent. So yeah, let's wrap it up in the interest of time, since we have more time afterwards during the reception. I wanted to acknowledge, nevertheless, that we have got colleagues joining us who go to meeting through a remote connection. It's difficult for us right now to establish who's there because some people are showing up with their name, others are not. But throughout the course of the meeting, we'll try to clear that up so we know exactly who's hiding between the dial numbers and so on. But now is the time for the team. Now is when I disappear, because this local secretariat is not just me. I've just arrived. And this amazing team has been doing a lot of things for the past years. And what they are going to share with you right now is just the highlights, really, a very quick tour of some of the critical dossiers that as a team they've been keeping together in 2018. Over to you, team. Thank you. Oh, you need this one, don't you? Perfect.
Hello, everybody. I'm Alice Yu. I am the program manager of SLoCaT, and I'm based in Taiwan. And so for 2018 and 19, our work program started in July this year, and it will end next year in June. And it was structured under 3 different key functions of what we do. We catalog knowledge and research in sustainable transport, such as one of the major things that we did last year was the global status report on transport and climate change. In addition to that, we also keep on reporting on key international processes such as COP and the Housing Political Forum. We also connect various stakeholders and consolidate the sustainable transport community through outreach and events that we've organized, such as Transport Day at COP. We also catalyze and raise ambition for sustainable transport development through initiatives such as the Transport Decarbonization Alliance. Based on the agreed work program for the last year's annual meeting, our activities are focused on 3 areas: urban transport, climate change, and cross-cutting initiatives. So in the remaining time, our team will be reporting on our activities from last year based on these different areas. For urban transport, so the high-level political forum takes place every year, and each year they select a number of SDGs for review. In 2018, high-level political forum reviewed SDG 11 on sustainable cities with the SDG indicator on public transport. So countries are invited to submit voluntary national reviews to report on their progress in implementing SDGs. Since the very first high-level political forum in 2016, SLoCaT has been conducting analysis on how transport has been reflected in these reporting submitted by their countries. The report that we have this year found that over 70% of BNRs in 2018 actually refer to urban transport. So it actually really gives us a very unique opportunity and channel to raise ambition for transport in the context of SDG implementation. I'm going to hand over to science.
Thanks, Alice. Good evening. My name is Mark Major. I'm Senior Advisor with SLoCaT, and I work part-time for the Secretariat, and I'm based in Girona in the north of Spain. So one of the things we're doing to try and connect people on urban mobility is with the support of some of our members, AFT, ICLE, Tumi Initiative, and the Islamic Development Bank. We've been doing some research into city networks around the world, finding out where they are and what they're doing, and trying to find some new ones that could be interested in learning more about transport and scaling up their work on transport. So trying to reinforce the work of existing city networks to scale up on transport. So this is ongoing work that we will be finishing quite soon. That's an example of connection. Another example of connecting is the work we're trying to bring together the transport community into different urban processes. So at the World Urban Forum, we had a very nice small group of members where we were actively working together, participating in each other's events, supporting each other, and that was really, using social media together. So a good example of a few days when as a partnership we work together, and I think really have an impact in those discussions. Similarly, the ESD Environmentally Sustainable Transport Forum in Mongolia in October had a particular focus on urban mobility. SLoCaT was there as a convener, as a facilitator to try and raise the profile of urban mobility in that forum and bring in our international network. In 2017, the UN Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean had a cities conference, of which was a small part was on urban mobility.
But then last year, they had the whole conference was focused on urban mobility. So we were able to be there with many of our partners who supported participation, who brought in cities, experts, and governments. So we had 3 days together there, bringing together governments and city officials and other transport experts. So there we had a role in facilitating this discussion, connecting transport and the urban communities. As an example of the catalyze action on urban mobility, we're a partner in the TUMI initiative, and we helped foster 2 of the winning pilot projects. So there were 10 pilot projects suggested the one last year, and we managed to get a successful project on walking in Nigeria with TUMI partner Walk 20, with SLoCaT partner Walk 21. We were able to get a project on electric tricycles, and these fantastic design electric tricycles which have solar powered refrigeration, so that people can get to markets with more of their goods intact, increase their income. So that's a great project in Morocco, which we've done with SLoCaT partner Growing Markets. Another thing we did is we contributed to the TUMI capacity building activities by when we were in Santiago with this coalition, but with all these great city actors, we had a 1-day capacity building seminar then, helping them to design and conceive urban mobility projects that were already attractive to the development bank. So what is that? How do you do that in a way that the bank, then you have a project which the banks are interested in funding? So that was another, again, that was delivered with SLoCaT partner Despacio, with the support of CAF and GIZ, and that was a great example of bringing together people and catalyzing them, and they were really motivated. The good thing there is in that training, they have some like case studies where you can work like on a case, so you have to imagine a scenario. So they were actually using real projects from their actual cities to work through the case studies. So that was really, really a nice event. Okay, we now switch to the second focus area for our work program, 2018-2019, climate change. And one of the things we did last year is we really got behind this Transport Decarbonisation Alliance. We got this launched and up and running. And this is an informal alliance of ambitious countries and cities and companies that are committing to do an accelerated decarbonisation of transport for 2050. So we now have 20 members of the alliance. And this is a very interesting new kind of partner for us, because of course, we're able to partner through the TDA with countries and cities who have a formal voice in these UN processes that we're often trying to influence. So actually, you know, if we're working with Costa Rica or with Portugal, they can actually stand up in these meetings and speak and pass our messages, and gives us an avenue for our messages that we never had before. SLoCaT was invited to be, as well as being the initiator of this, with our partners in the Paris process on mobility and climate, we were invited to act as a secretariat for this alliance in the first year. And on the 1st of October last year, that mandate was renewed for 2019. So we're going to carry on being the secretariat for the next year. Another example of the catalyzing role is this UNFCCC process last year, where they tried to create a dialogue between state and non-state actors. So we were active in a number of places. We did a written submission on behalf of the transport community in April. Holger Dahlkemann, the former co-chair of the partnership, took part in the Talanoa dialogue, which took place in May. And this, at the beginning, people were a bit susceptible of this. You know, is this going to work? But actually, as we've seen through the year, this has really created an exchange between parties and non-staffing. It used to be that only the countries could speak in these UN processes, and anyone else was outside the room, was the second category participant. But this was, we saw this gradually, and you can see how they, in the picture, how they set up the room very specifically to create a different type of atmosphere. And this, and we also had a specific session on urban mobility in Latin America at the SLoCaT conference, and again did a submission to the Talanoa dialogue. Interestingly, we did analysis of this, and of all the Talanoa dialogue submissions, hundreds and hundreds of them during the year, 36% of them addressed transport. So, interestingly, we thought this was going to probably die out, but actually even the Polish presidency of the UNFCCC, they kind of saw the value of this new way of getting information and understanding each other. And it looks like this dialogue is going to carry on in 2019, so we should look out for that. That's the end of my brief spot. I'm going to pass you over to Carl, please.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. Yes, so I'm Carl Feed. I'm Research Director of the SLoCaT Partnership, and I serve the Secretariat from distant and darkest Chicago. and I'm glad to see all of you here. And I would like to, with these next few slides, illustrate a couple of highlights of the SLoCaT Secretariat and the SLoCaT Partnership, and with a broader set of partners to catalog progress on transport and climate change. And the first example I would like to illustrate here is the contribution to the IPCC special report on a 1.5 degree scenario. As some of you know, and as some of you have contributed to this effort, the partnership on behalf of our members submitted in May a paper on decarbonizing transport to achieve the targets of the Paris Agreement. This was published by the journal Energy Efficiency, and as such was candidate for input to the special report. And so we see several references to this paper within the report, and this has been a very important topic of conversation in the report, as you know, at COP24, and we expect it to be so in the coming months as we go through the process of renewing the NDCs before 2020. A second example of cataloging low carbon transport is SLoCaT's role as theme lead within the applied research program in high volume transport, I should say, for DFID. We again are leading the low carbon transport theme in concert with SLoCaT member ITDP, who are leading the urban transport theme. And in this capacity, we're cataloging the state of knowledge on low carbon transport in a number of countries in Africa and in South Asia. We're in the process of authoring publication-ready papers on this topic, and we will in the future look to further assess capacity needs and ways to help fill gaps on low carbon transport within these countries, and also look to potential involvement in a second stage of this project. A final example of cataloging on the topic of transport and climate change is, as Alice had mentioned in an earlier slide, the launch of the Transport and Climate Change Global Status Report. This culminates 2 years of effort. This was kicked off in collaboration with GIZ and with the primary funder, Hewlett Foundation, as well as BMU. We have worked very closely with REN21, to whom we're indebted as a special advisor. And what we have produced as a partnership is a resource for policymakers to help increase ambition, where we've compiled nearly 200 policy examples from 70 countries, looking at very broad geographic diversity on policy targets set, measures implemented, again, in concert with our GIZ network and many others in this room. And so I'd really like to thank the individuals, more than 100, who contributed in many, many ways, authoring, reviewing, etc., from 40 organizations. And I think this really illustrates two things. One, the strength of the partnership and the important contributions from all of you and those beyond this room. And it also is a very useful segue, I think, to our role in connecting actors on transport and climate change. And with that, I will pass it over to Angela.
Hi, everyone. I'm Angela Enriquez. I'm one of the newer members of SLoCaT. I started in July, and I'm based here in Houston. So in 2018, we continued our role as connectors as PPMC through partnership with Moving On by Michelin. And we continued as conveners for the Marrakesh Partnership Global Climate Action, focusing on our transport initiatives. In 2018, we added one more initiative, which was the electric vehicle initiative from IEA. And also we released our third annual progress report, which highlights the activities of the 22 transport initiatives. Then in 2018, we also started to focus more on having discussions and including non-state actors. In July, in cooperation with some of our members, such as UNDP and Michelin, we organized a high-level session on urban mobility, and Talia was able to attend and represent SLoCaT. Then in September, at the Global Climate Action Summit, the TDA welcomed 3 new non-state actor members, California, and also 2 private sector members, they're took place in Greece. At COP, in our role as the co-focal point of transport with ITF, we planned, coordinated, and promoted over 50 transport-related events, and it's really important for us, and we would love to highlight the fact that we had a high-level event with the UN Secretary General, 5 heads of state, on the future of e-mobility. So this test was a big focal point for us at COP, because this really shows that transport has become part of the agenda. Then we also released the 6 key messages, which thank you for everyone who provided their input. And focusing around the key messages, we had 5 daily reports that were sent out to over 3,000 subscribers. And with that, I'll send it over to Nicola to talk about our platform.
Hello, my name is Nicola Murray. I'm senior researcher at SLoCaT, and third focus area of us was SLoCaT initiatives that cover both urban transport and climate change. At COP24, we released, together with the Islamic Development Bank, ISDB, a report on transport and climate change with strong focus on those low carbon development or low carbon transport for development. It was specific, it focuses on the member countries of the ISDB and looks at what issues they face, how their NDCs embrace transport, and what urban transport solutions do they have to mitigate transport emissions. And it's part of our wider work with ISDB on our urban networks, as Marcus introduced earlier to you, and having more climate change area of this look. And we will continue to, because I was just released this report, so in late January, early February, we will do a webinar to a little bit highlight the findings of the report, show it to the report audience, and also try to make it more digestible for people who don't want to read the report but want to know what's in it and what the main findings. Then, in addition, we worked for the Multilateral Development Bank Working Group on Sustainable Transport, and we supported every year they publish this progress report on the activities in terms of sustainable transport. So we supported them in the last year on the 2016-2017 progress report, and then we also convene the working group meetings or any activities that this group had in the last months, and also we will continue to do so. And also for next 2017-2018 report, we will again support the MDB working group on sustainable transport. We are also, as many of you also are part of Sustainable Mobility for All, Sun for All, and it's very important for the SLoCaT partnership to be very active and proactive in Sun for All. We, in the summer of 2018, we've been elected as one of 2 civil society representatives of Sun for All steering committee. And yeah, we will continue to contribute to activities of Sun for All, of the global roadmap of action, anything else that's planned, any other major meetings that are going to happen in those next days. And then there are certain areas we want to explore further. One of them are shared mobility principles, where SLoCaT is one of the founding partners, coalition members, and we want to see how we can further expand shared mobility principles, how we can further increase the impact and the significance for the transport sector, but also for in general. Also, we aim to, in the process, to strengthening engagement in Africa. We want to expand more activities in that region. And this can heard earlier today, Carl Piet, he introduced our low carbon project by different maybe are currently doing that, but also looking for other opportunities to more engagement. So that's so far from the highlights from 2018. Also, what I'm responsible for are like social media channels of SLoCaT. So please follow us on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. And it's also like not only like it's all work of 2018, all these highlights, all like really only have been possible thanks to your support and through your help on realizing and achieving all of these activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, team. I know it was very difficult to concentrate in just some minutes all the work one year, and I truly appreciate you made that effort. There's one person who's not here with us today, but is still a crucial pillar of the team, and that person is Talia. She's in maternity leave, enjoying her family life right now in Turkey with her family, with a new addition to the family, a young baby, a baby girl, and with her son. So she'll be hopefully joining us back in April. We're all counting on her. We're also respecting her family time, and I shall be getting in touch with her again next month precisely to see where she's doing. And then there is somebody in the team today who's got a special day, and that's Alice. It's her birthday today. Yay! Now we go over to Bronwyn, I think, for a few updates.
Yes, you don't want me to sing.
No.
Yes, we're going to turn over to Bronwyn, but just a quick reminder, I don't see a lot of people doing post-its yet, and you do have homework, and there will be no wine until
you do the homework.
So, but let's turn it over to Bronwyn, our esteemed foundation treasurer. Thank you.
Don't worry. I'm going to move here. I cannot see people otherwise.
So I will be very quick. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Bronwyn Thornton. I actually work for an organisation called Ball 21. We do what it says on the tin, and I am the treasurer of SLoCaT. So I stood here last year with a less than rosy picture to share with you, and we were very frank with you about the situation with SLoCaT, and we reached out to you as members of the organisation and for your support through this year of quite a unique year of transition for an organisation. So I'm very happy to be standing here with a much happier story and a much more positive and sort of sense of renewal financially as well as within the team and all those things as well. So I just have three really quick messages that from that point back there, we're out of the red, we're back in the black, and even though Marusha is wearing red.
No message implied. Red for energy.
And that's not easy to do when you are in a transition period and you have some catch up to do, but we have got there, and it's very heartening to have achieved that. We did a very thorough review of budgets and costings and projections and things along the way. We have also, we mentioned last year the need to look at our internal systems. We commissioned a report. It came up with a bunch of really fantastic recommendations, which we are continuing to implement, but we have already seen the benefit of streamlining processes, reviewing our financial commitments, our contracts, our outsourcing to ensure it's cost effective, and implementing new methods to improve time savings and efficiency within what is essentially a very small team, and so that their energies can go elsewhere. So that's been fantastic. And I'm very pleased to report a positive outlook. Since Marusha came on board, we have already signed grants and received grants and some contracts between her appointment and the end of the year. We have a positive outlook. I didn't use the word pipeline up here, but apparently there's a lot coming down the pipeline. We have a close link with our strategic planning with some longer term funding goals and ongoing discussions with funders. So it's very heartening to see at the strategic level, at the baseline level, and all of the methods and systems in between, really an organisation that has matured in many ways, and we've come from last year's point to this very lovely positive output. And the only thing I will repeat from last year is don't forget to pay your membership fees, because they're not the most important line in the budget, but it all helps. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And thanks a lot, Bronwyn, for all the help you've been giving me as a treasurer. She's really gone past the terms of reference of the treasurer, serving pro bono in the board. So thanks a lot. Now it's over to me. to try to share with you some ideas about, I've called it pathways for development. Let's start with a confession that I don't think will shock anybody, but it's important to be transparent and honest when one joins a new job, with the idea of staying there for as long as you want. And the confession is that these first 90 days in office had little to do with what I expected to be, in the sense that, imagine a bit the perfect storm, it's like I join on a Monday and Talia goes on maternity leave on the previous Friday. So I lose all that core institutional memory and operations work and the trillion things that Talia was doing. And in the process of my first kind of weeks in office, I lose an accountant because it was planned that it was going to happen. And I'm joining a team which is in the last leg of preparations towards COP, one of the highest moments of engagement. Luckily, we have partners. They are sitting here with us today, who were, working with the team for many months. But it was a tough moment as well because we had some key deliverables, very important, that were coming to have to deliver in some of our key contracts. So it was a bit of a perfect storm scenario. And I do acknowledge that I hadn't had the time to do all the mind space that I would have wanted to have in order to be able to start crafting a bit of a strategic development plan, because that's my proposal, that we give ourselves a multi-annual strategic development plan. So that's something that I'm starting now. So what I wanted to share with you is a few observations that I think I had the opportunity of witness and start mulling over in the past couple of months. The first observation is that we really have a bright future ahead. And I've taken the liberty, Clayton is here in the room, of taking an excerpt from this independent review that he did, which was commissioned by the board and supported graciously by the Foundation. And we have a brand that is robust, that is strong, that is recognized, and is recognized based on the quality work and the legitimacy of being a key actor in the field. And that means, therefore, that our mission and our core functions, the way I see it is that they are still absolutely relevant. And we don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's not as if suddenly we have to change what SLoCaT is. Perhaps what we could do around our mission and around our roles and functions is just to explain a bit better, to be a bit more accessible in the language we use, so it gets across clearer who we are and what it is that we do. And that goes hand in hand with refreshing our branding, including the website. In case any of you are wondering, is anything going to happen this year with the website? Oh, yes, there is. The plan is that something will really happen with the website. And we don't lose track of the fact that I understand that many of you over the past years have been bringing in the multilingual parameter, the fact that we're a global partnership, but there's more languages than English. We're going to have to see how we do that within the limited resources that we have got, but it is indeed in our mind. Where I, however, perceive that perhaps we have to invest a bit more effort is in progressively moving away from that to 1 or 2 year horizon in planning our activities, to having a strategic development plan. My proposal to you is that we do a 4-year, particularly counting this year in already. This year will be halfway through the moment we adopt it. And the idea is precisely collectively setting with you members what are the strategic objectives that as a partnership we need to target in order to strengthen the impact towards our mission, to really be more impactful in the next coming years. And I think that another observation of mine, you're going to think like this is so banal and so trivial, but I just wanted to put it in common, is that the operating context that we have right now has got very little to do with what we had 10 years ago when we were set up. You will notice that in that slide, there's very little about trends for the transport sector itself. I can actually encourage you to have a look at the DCCG STAR, which in one of its sections provides, I think, a very thorough overview of what are those trends in the transport sector. So what I've tried to provide there was more of a mix of some global trends here and there. And of course, we are still needing positive narratives. There's still a moment, of geopolitical turmoil, post-truth, all those things that we know that require us, I think, to provide positive narrative, making the case that the technology is available, that there's alliances of countries, cities, and companies which are actually making action happen on the ground. And we also have to make the case that we are no longer setting agendas at the global level. What we're doing is implementing them. So how are we going to help policymakers at different levels of government go and implement those agendas, and how are we going to actually support the practitioners in doing so as well? And that is going to imply more cross-sectoral work and more multi-stakeholder partnerships than what we used to do some 10 years ago. So obviously, SLoCaT is an example of what a multi-stakeholder partnership is, but we were one of the pioneers 10 years ago. It was not necessarily the formula for working together. There is an element out there in the global geopolitics, one belt, one road. I think it's quite an interesting thing that is happening, that is going to potentially change the face of infrastructure as it is known. It'd be pretty interesting to see what is the impact in our sector connected to other elements of our sector. Because I come from that world, certainly the trend of urbanization that goes hand in hand with informality, if we look at urbanization from a developing country perspective, is something that is marking our work, I think, much more than what it did 10 years ago. Informality, not only in livelihoods, not only in settlements and how we connect the people, the place where people live and the place where people work, but also how people work. We know very much the informal economy is very often characterized with a very basic mode of transport that people use to actually make a living out of it. We live in a moment of electrification, isn't it, where we are all very, very carried away almost with electrification. But in this era of electrification, what about a void shifting grid? And what is the role of SLoCaT in terms of the strategic objectives to look to the whole sequence of that paradigm, the void shifting grid? So what are some of our strategic objectives? This is just a couple of ideas here and there, just purely a brainstorm and nothing really set in stone. But of course, the first idea is to move to that multi-annual perspective, and then to harness some momentum that is there. We have a momentum in climate action, as Mark was telling us, that goes beyond the intergovernmental aspect of the negotiations that has really been galvanizing over the years. There is a dimension of localizing, bringing to the cities, bringing to the local level with some national action, these global agendas. And there is also a new component in the implementation of these global agendas, which is the regional dimension. We witness now the emergence of regional climate weeks in the context of UNFCCC, and also the high-level political forum where these voluntary national reviews of the SDGs is prepared with a regional dimension throughout the year. And that regional dimension, I believe, can help us to engage directly with those actors who are in charge of making change happen. And by getting closer to them and telling messages to them that are more relevant to that regional context where they share certain commonality and certain challenges, could actually help us to get action agendas and interconnect sectors together. Targeting policymakers is a must. Because we are in the implementation moment. If we take right now a very clear window of opportunity in the climate process, it's about the national determined contributions in that process. We have literally 15 months to really impact on that process. And we can do it if perhaps we use some of the knowledge we already produce, but repackage it a bit in different types of products and in different perspectives that are more meaningful or accessible to the policymaker that is trying to make a change at the national or at the subnational level. Because SLoCaT synthesizes knowledge, produces knowledge, then tries to champion advocacy and create policy change, and then has got all these wealth of members with your practice, your day-to-day practice of the sector. I think that we are extraordinarily well positioned to champion an interface that does not necessarily happen by itself, which is that sequence between knowledge, policy, and practice that many times gets ruptured. We don't necessarily have knowledge-based policy, or sometimes we have the policy, but in practice it's not occurring. So there is a lot of things that go in different directions in that interface, and I believe that SLoCaT can be pretty well positioned to act on that. And last but not least, for me, there is a bit of a, might not be in the strategic dimension, a strategic objective, but certainly in a strategic lens of our work, which is still translating to others why transport, why sustainable transport, what does it mean in an overall human development framework for people, for planet, and for prosperity? How do we connect our sector to other constituencies? How do we broker alliances with other sectors, not just within our sector? And are there any cross-cutting themes that we could leverage to do so? I just took the risk of putting a couple of cross-cutting themes there. There are many others, I understand, and as a partnership, we will have to decide whether it is gender, whether it is innovation, whether it is access to finance, whether it is spatial planning, or whether it is none of these, or we don't even want to do that. But my point being, going to others, going out there of our sector, and creating that cross-sectoral work with all of this. Another observation that I would like to make, and I do understand that I have not had the opportunity of talking to all our members, is the beauty of having such membership. I've only managed to cover something like 65% of it so far, which is not at all 100% of it. But I'm so delighted to see to what extent our membership is really hands-on. They really want SLoCaT there. They perceive SLoCaT as an important actor in the ecosystem. And if anything, they want a deeper partnership. They don't want less partnership. They want more SLoCaT partnership. The board, what can I tell you about them? They've really been committed. They've really showed us that our board is a critical mechanism of our governance, that even in times of transition and, when we go through thick and thin, the board is there as a transparent and inclusive mechanism that actually activates and leverages the partnership spirit that we've got inherent to SLoCaT. I would warmly encourage you, certainly, to keep an eye on that election process that is going to come up. And we were discussing earlier in the board, probably the kickoff date is going to be April. We are looking into a lot of detail what our current statutory laws say and how we have to do that in due respect to all of them. And a couple of goals for the Secretariat. In my years of experience in membership organizations, which are 17, it's actually almost all my career there, I have seen that membership-based organizations don't exist without their members. They really run the risk of being secretariats that run solo, completely disconnected from their members. But it is difficult. The Secretariat has to really have different tools, different approaches, and be constantly connected to the membership. So I've also learned that in a membership-based organization, in a network, members are going to get out of that network in proportion to what they put in. So how can the Secretariat better leverage that membership, better facilitate and interconnect what you do? I think that from our side, we are considering internally in the Secretariat how to establish a system of focal points. So you can have an entry point directly into the Secretariat. Let's imagine that you have them all there, and there Mark takes a group of members, Alice takes another group of members, and we are regularly in touch with you. We really get to know what you're up to, what are you doing. We can connect the gaps. We can better align the suggestions we make to you in terms of activities. And TCC-GSR is an excellent example of how we actually contributed to leverage the partnership between sports organizations. So how do we actually come up with activities that are not just the SLoCaT Secretariat activities, but actually the SLoCaT Secretariat with the member that we have beautiful examples over the years, but I think that we can enhance that approach to really make the leverage the force of the partnership and make it a bit more attractive for all of you to engage. In terms of the activities and the approaches that we use, again, let's not reinvent the wheel. I am not here to change everything. It's not as if suddenly, everything that has been done in the past is no longer important to us. So don't expect me to change absolutely everything, because that's not the vision I'm bringing here. But perhaps when it comes to our activities, there's certain twists that we can incorporate in what we do or in how we do it that would perhaps connect us better, maximize our impact. Even things like, on the basis of the knowledge we've got, besides publishing big reports, can we publish issues briefs on critical topics that we know are catalytic and are easier to read for policymakers? Can we go a bit more visual? We were discussing these in a retreat we had over the past days as a team. Can we use more infographics? When we reach out to policymakers, can we provide more toolkits? Can we partner with our members to provide more trainings? Can we organize more webinars? Can we perhaps go more into storytelling when we reach out to other constituencies and bring them with us? And when we do our convenings, we have convenings when it's just us, so we enhance the partnership and the transport sector itself. And we have other convenings in which we deliberately invite the gender sector to come join us, the youth to come join us, the innovation people to come join us, the finance crowd to come join us, and we do joint convenings with them on the basis of critical issues that we would have determined on an issue brief. And collaborative alliances, I think that SLoCaT knows very well what that means. We are per se already a collaborative alliance. We have two that we could very much build upon: the Transport Decarbonization Alliance, our Paris Process Mobility and Climate with Moving On by Michelin. We have that to build upon. Now the question is, can we have collaborative alliances with other sectors? Can we think about anything that would make sense for us to go to other sectors and have a collaborative alliance out of it? My last two slides are about work on the team. Again, I took the liberty of taking another mini paragraph of what Clayton found in his independent review. The team, you've seen it. You've seen them for many years. I have nothing to tell you. For me, they're a dream team. They've been fabulous in bringing me on board and keeping the machinery going. I also acknowledge as a manager that there's a couple of things that I have to pay particular attention to. Of course, sound financial management with a short-term stabilization objective, but more importantly, with the sustainability in the longer run objective is crucial. And that goes in hand with fundraising, perhaps with a longer-term approach, and for series of projects, for suites of projects, and not necessarily just for small projects. Easily said, and then difficult because, of course, part of our work is determined by donor dynamics, naturally, and by what is available out there. And we are a team, as you know, virtual. We telework. We are spread across the world. When I joined, somebody said the sun never sets in the SLoCaT team, and it's true because from Chicago all the way to you, no, you are the farthest away from us in the team to Seoul. So that is beautiful because it means that the team delivers perfectly well and lives wherever they want to live. But it also means that in terms of operations, we got to get, a bit more dynamic, and we got to clean some of the ways in which we work currently in order to be more efficient and optimize the positive side of teleworking. And also project management. We know that that's an area where we would like to improve what we do. And last but not least, the Secretariat cannot exist without the team. So sustainable workloads, a bit more of mind space, in order for this beautiful team of experts, because they are technical experts in the field, I am not, in order for them to be able to set agendas for the partnership and for the transport sector. So what's coming next? What to watch out for? This proposal of mine of having a strategic development plan that could be in a multi-annual configuration, our proposed timeline. So by the end of February, I could have put something together in the form of a draft. We would reach out to you for a 3-week or 1-month consultation. We're going to really give ourselves proper time as a partnership to come up with that. We would compile and integrate your comments. We will give ourselves perhaps some couple of weeks to do so, then reach out to you with a second draft final for approval, with the idea of giving ourselves as a partnership this first multi-annual perspective to our work with the strategic development objective in it by April or May. So a call to all of you already, a warm encouragement to please engage in that consultation, because it's a beautiful moment for all of us to shape our future together. Some areas that you can naturally expect there, we're going to be having a look at what is our operating context now that, as I say, has evolved over the years. Our mission and our vision statement a bit refreshed, a bit retweaked with that a bit more punchy branding into it. Our strategic objectives, focuses, and the strengths that we've got as a partnership. The streams of work that we do, which are not necessarily going to change. This is not about making our scope of work wider. It's more about being a bit more strategic and about perhaps going deeper in some areas, not necessarily suddenly doing much more in many other areas. And then organizational enablers, that is a partnership, and as an organization we need to have. So this is my proposal to you, to give me a bit more time to put forward our first multi-annual approach to work, to really warmly encourage you to stay tuned, to participate in that consultation process, and to thank you very much for making the partnership happen. I'm very, very aware that the partnership doesn't exist without you. So from now onwards, we're going to work with the team to try to leverage the impact that you already bring in your day-to-day work and try to multiply it times at least as many members as we've got. So thank you very much. And now is when I need to check with the team that Kerry is coming in later. Yes, perfect. So then we're going to go directly over to Nicolas. We have a video connection. That's what I'm checking with the team of one of our speakers. Nicolas Beaumont is the Senior Vice President for Sustainability in Michelin. And you have seen him over the years, of course. I don't have to properly introduce him at all to you. But something that I have observed as well that we have not used a lot or maximized is our relationship with Moving On. And Nicolas is going to tell us on what is it that we are seeking that we're not sufficiently exploited, isn't it?
Yes.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Marusha. So good afternoon to everyone. So I'm very happy to spend these 10 minutes talking to you about Moving On. What is this Moving On system? What it encompasses? And why is Moving On linked to SLoCaT and what you can get out of it? And I think that's the question we are going to try to solve in the 10 minutes to come. So we need to do a little bit of history. I'm sorry, but we need to do that. It happens that Michelin is a company that was created 120 years ago by a family. And this family had a vision already in 1898. That was a vision of sustainable mobility. Basically, Michelin started by inventing the removable tire, the tire that can be removed from the wheel, because before that, the tire was linked to the wheel. Okay? And also, the Michelin built airplanes, the Breguet airplanes. Michelin was the owner of Citroën that was sold to Peugeot in the 1970s. Michelin invented the Michelin. You know the Michelin, it's a train that was on tires, and there are still some in Madagascar that are still running. So from the very beginning, Michelin was a company that was interested in all modes of transport, and that was interested already in mobility that is safe. And if you look at the first advertising, that's the tire that doesn't get punctured, the tire that lasts, the tire that is good for the environment. Efficiency, removable tire, etc. Accessibility, how do you enable people to have access to mobility everywhere, and good for the environment. So if you look at this, in the DNA of the Michelin group, it was there from the beginning. Then, in 91, Michelin invented the low rolling resistance tire. I don't know if you know, but it happens that the tire is responsible today for 30% of the fuel consumption of the vehicle, just because of a friction force that is there and some heat that is dissipated. Michelin invented it, and at that time, 1991, nobody cared. There was no market at all. And we got back to our DNA and we said that, mobility is important for humankind. It helps the progress of humankind. It's access to health, it's access to education, it's access to friends, and we need to push it. And that's why in 1998, Michelin created the first conference on sustainable mobility that was called at that time the Michelin Challenge Bibender. And starting from there, it was really very much Michelinized because you had Michelin Challenge Bibender. And from there, Michelin started to create kind of an ecosystem of companies, friends, I would say, of sustainable mobility and of Michelin. And year after year, this challenge Bibendum went on. Then, in 2015, there was COP21. And it's where the contact between SLoCaT and this challenge Bibendum that moved to moving on ecosystem appeared. It was very simple. France was in charge of COP21. And when they were looking basically at decarbonization, transport in the COP process was nowhere. And when they looked at what are the people who are fighting for transport and for decarbonization of transport, Ségolène Royal, who was the Minister for Environment at that time, found SLoCaT on one hand and Michelin Challenge Bibendum on the other hand. And so they asked Corny Wizenga at that time and Patrick Oliva, who was working for Michelin, to meet at the ministry. And they said very clearly, you are more, your center of gravity is more companies, your center of gravity is more public organizations and NGOs. Please join your efforts and do something. And the result of doing something together between SLoCaT and Challenge Bibendum was, this roadmap of action, the first methodology to try to move towards a decarbonized transport sector. And it's the first sector that was able to publish, I would say, a methodology. And if you look at all the name of companies, of organizations here there behind, you find the ecosystem of the Michelin Challenge Bibendum at that time, plus the SLoCaT members. There was a huge consultation that was done, etc. And it was the time when Michelin said, we are not doing it for communication purposes. We don't care. We are doing it because we believe in sustainable mobility, and if mobility doesn't become sustainable, it's going to disappear. And it's when it was decided to move from Michelin Challenge Bibendum to moving on At the beginning, it was Moving On Summit by Michelin, and now we've even removed the by Michelin. Michelin doesn't appear anywhere anymore. And now, basically, we position ourselves we facilitate. We are becoming, I would say, the secretariat of this Moving On ecosystem. And this Moving On ecosystem, it is two parts. A Moving On lab, and the Moving On lab, basically, it's the center of it is companies. So you see all those names of big companies. So you've got one Moving On lab in Europe. There's one started in North America, in Canada, in Montreal, and we are starting little by little Asia. And these companies work together, create communities of interest to try to tackle issues around urban freight, around connected car, around issues linked to mobility, around maritime. And 2 years ago, we said, discussing at that time with Corny, why don't we put SLoCaT into the Moving On lab? And then basically, we manage in order that SLoCaT becomes a member of the Moving On lab. So you are members of the Moving On lab. And at that time, we tried to ask the members to be part of sub-communities of interest, and it didn't really work. But there's a real opportunity. You are there by right, and being there by right, you should be aware of what is being launched. You should be able to be part of it. And it's the same for PPMC. PPMC, for instance, we launched a roadmap. The Indian government wanted to use the roadmap methodology for India. So we launched something on India. Because it's PPMC and it's Moving On and SLoCaT together, in one of the news that you receive by mail about what's happening with SLoCaT and PPMC, we clearly posted, there is a roadmap on India going on. You are more than welcome, in some of your entities locally are interested, to be part of it, because it's organized by WWF, his partner, and FICCI, that is the Indian Chamber of Commerce, and there are workshops organized in India. We did this in the newsletter, and no response. I must be very clear. And your organizations, some of you have people in India. You have people you could help a lot. And so what I'm saying, what basically we are not able to do at the moment is really join our efforts and help each other on the different topics. And it's what I would like to, with Marusha, to push in the months to come in order that SLoCaT can benefit from what the Moving On ecosystem can bring and what the Moving On ecosystem could benefit from SLoCaT. Each month, there is a kind of a steering committee of the Moving On lab. I'm there every month, and I'm there every month as your representatives and representatives of PPMC. I don't represent Michelin at this meeting. I just give the news about what's happening at SLoCaT, what's happening with PPMC, in order to try that little by little, these companies, this center of gravity, gets used to working more with organizations like your organization. And it's also what we are trying to do at the Moving On Summit. And I see here two people that were there last year. Clayton was at the Moving On Summit last year, and Holger was there. And what we are trying to do is really moving from ambition to action, have people work together, interact, and it's not, the big panels and the big meetings. I was in the TRB today, and it's the same big rooms, almost empty, with people talking with each other, a little bit what you can see at COP. We try to do it very differently. Bring all stakeholders together on one particular topic, do a workshop, try to come up with a solution or a next step. As Marusha said, we need to move from ambition to action. So the Moving On Summit, and you can ask Clayton and Holger what they think about it, is also a platform for you, because you are members of SLoCaT. Michelin is a member of SLoCaT. We are facilitating the Moving On ecosystem and the Moving On Summit. I am here to help you be part of it, and in order that you can share what you know how to do with all the other stakeholders in order to make things move forward towards a more sustainable mobility. So if you're interested in knowing more, I've got some leaflets here, but I don't want to do especially advertising. We'll give more and more news through the newsletter. And I think that by joining our efforts, we can complement each other very, very well and go beyond what we are doing purely on the decarbonization through PPMC. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We're moving quite, a good pace, I think, on the agenda. But I also acknowledge that there might be a lot of questions here. A lot of ideas that are popping up. And the idea is to capture them at some moment. So don't worry, we're not just you're gonna be just like top hat. We're gonna listen to you as well. But I don't see many post-its. I understand that it's difficult to listen, pay attention, and pay the respect of listening to the speaker, but at the same time, write post-its. But afterwards, we're really gonna check that you can have wine or not. So then it's the lesson. What we're going to do now is a little change to the agenda as it was really conceived. We have a connection with the Office of the United Nations Secretary General. They finally couldn't join us here for different reasons, but they are linking via video. Kerry Constabile will. She's right now in a meeting with the SG, so she will be out at 6:30, and that's the time at which she will join us. So we are swapping items, which means that now Mark and Chris, the only member of the team who you have not heard so far. Why? Because Chris only joined in October, and therefore Chris and I, we both said, like, we cannot take any credit for what actually happened in 2018. So we are, putting ourselves out of that presentation. But now is the moment for you both to take us through briefly some of those key convenings that have a lot of potential for us to engage in and maximize the impact of our vision. So I don't know to whom I need to give the mic. Yes.
Thank you, Marusha. So as Marusha mentioned, my name is Chris Decky. I am now Senior Associate for Policy and Advocacy and Outreach in SLoCaT. It's really good to be with you all and start to learn all your names and know your faces. And I feel really great to be welcomed so nicely by everyone here. So as mentioned, Mark and I are going to talk a bit about some of these important meetings that are taking place this year around sustainable development and climate. So here's a bit of a very convoluted timeline. And part of the reason I think why we wanted to show it to you is not to scare you per se, but to kind of show you how packed the calendar is in 2019. There's so much happening around the sustainable development process with the lead up to the high-level political forum in July in New York. Some of you know what this is. It's the global review process for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. There's also these regional climate weeks happening where there's a number of convenings in different parts of the world around how different regions can work together to learn from each other and their best practices in their NDCs and their nationally determined contributions. So there's a lot of things happening. And we've tried to highlight in red some of the places where we think as SLoCaT we can have a solid impact. Keep in mind that this year in the high-level political forum, SDG 13 on climate change and climate action is under review. Okay, so we're in this moment, I think, where we're entering a very interesting phase for the transport sector to really engage more strongly in the sustainable development process. Not only that, this year, the high-level political forum is entering its first phase in which it will take place under the auspices of the UN General Assembly. So a significant year because for the first time, we're going to have at the heads of state and government level, the SDGs being discussed and talked about during the high-level week of the GA. Add to that, the UN Secretary General's Climate Summit, which is happening on the same exact week. Okay, so there's so much we need to really keep in mind as to go through 2019, but we'll take you through it a bit more detail in the subsequent slides. Okay, so just to kind of zoom in a bit more, the global cycle for the review of the Sustainable Development Goals is, as I said, in this high-level political forum, but we also have in all the regional commissions of the UN these regional forums for sustainable development. So each of the regional commissions of the UN will be going through this process of sharing best practices, working with stakeholders, getting inputs from the UN system so that those people at the lower level of the ministries of the different countries can actually work together to decide how best to go through their process of reviewing their implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. So we as SLoCaT think this is a good opportunity to kind of target those people working in ministries who are really at the forefront of implementation. And Marusha mentioned that a bit. So we think that we'll be able to really have an impact at some of those different regional forums for sustainable development this year. Then there's these EGMs, these expert group meetings that are taking place on each SDG. And although these are by invitation only from UNDESA, the Department for Economic and Social Affairs, I think the fact that we're being called upon so strongly to engage in the climate processes with the Office of the Secretary General and with UNFCCC, we'll be able to see how we can enter that process and really giving our inputs on behalf of the transport sector into the EGM taking place at least on climate action on SDG 13. Then this voluntary national review process. I know some of you are engaged in the SDG processes, but if not, the VNRs are in fact the national processes by which countries are meant to go through their implementation process of the 2030 agenda. Not to repeat constantly, but this is where countries then present at the high-level political forum their progress on the implementation of the goals. So I think, again, now that climate is being reviewed as one of the goals, it's a good opportunity for SLoCaT to really enter the fray and see how we can have an impact, at least not just at the global level, but maybe there's some entry points at the national level for us to impact these review processes. So, Mark.
Thanks, Chris. So one final slide, specifically on the climate process. And an important thing to remember, I mean, we've put the emphasis in this presentation on this sustainable development process, because of course, you know, many of you will know, those who work in developing countries, is that climate is often dealt with as one of the issues within sustainable development. So I mean, sometimes, you know, in some countries there's like a very strong focus on climate, but in developing countries it's very, very often climate is just embedded in one of the many things they're doing. So it's really important for us to see climate in that focus. And on that first slide, we showed you a little bit where those processes can interconnect. So the Paris Agreement mandated a 5-year cycle for this process of countries setting their national determined contributions, and then the reviewing of those and this constant maintenance, improving and increasing ambitions. It's going to be a 5-year cycle stretching on into the future. 2020 is the first date when we're going to be having this synthesis and this review of where we are so far. But the thing to remember is that in the years of those reviews and that stocktake, the NDCs have to be submitted at least 9 months in before. So what actually this means is that there's a window of opportunity. It's actually it's less than 15 months we have to influence this next generation, because they have to be submitted by March, so there can be a synthesis report and there can be the stocktake for the discussion at the COP at the end of the year. So this is really short, and that's why we were trying to focus on those key events in that timeline where we could try and have an impact, and when we're starting to identify ones where we think we could have an impact and where we have funding to participate together. So okay, I want to give. I mean, so this is going to be 5-year cycles, so we should get used to this. This is going to be going on into the future. So I mean, you know, what they do in this first cycle is important, because the next cycle they're meant to improve on it and increase the ambition. And this is going to go on with the synthesis reports and the global stocktake. Of course, we're focusing here on this formal UNFCCC process and what countries are doing. You know, but as we've talked about before, all this dynamism with the non-state actors, what's happening with companies, what's happening with cities, with states, that's really, really interesting. It doesn't always get reflected in the NDCs, but creates an energy and dynamism. Those of you that were at GCAS, it was absolutely stunning, the volume of private sector commitments that are being made across the whole economy. So this is not just, we're not over-focusing on this formal multilateral process, but also seeing it in a broader sense. And all of those events Chris was talking about, the space for non-state actors to be present. So we're going to work on that. The last thing I want to say is about the importance of on-the-ground implementation. A lot of this might seem so far away for some of the projects that you're trying to do in some small place in Africa or Latin America, but I think it's really, really important. My experience of being a climate negotiator is what people are prepared to do isn't because you're telling them to do it. I mean, I'm trying to tell you to do something which is difficult or painful, and you think it's going to be expensive. It's not a very easy sell. But if you've had some examples of some projects in some place in your country, it went well, you know, you had a good time, there was lots of co-benefits, it was cheaper than you thought, then it's actually really easy. So looking to the long term, you know, all that practical on-the-ground work is really important. That's what actually is going to drive ambition in the long term. It's not because someone outside the country is telling them what to do, it's because they have a learning process themselves, which means they'll scale up ambition. So for me, this could be really a golden period for the partnership as we link these kind of implementation of these global processes with the practical reality, the hard work on the ground that many of you are doing in your project. So I think it's an exciting time. It's a bit scary to think about the next 14 months, but it's going to go on and on. So we'll stop there.
Well, just one more point.
We won't stop there.
I actually asked Chris.
We produced a number of technical memos that would be very useful for you to read, especially to explain a lot of what we're talking about up here, because there's really a lot happening. I don't think our slides do even an iota of justice to the amount of things that are taking place this year. So please have a look at our memos on these regional climate weeks. We have a memo on the high-level political forum and the review of the SDGs. We have a memo on ICA, the International Conference on Climate Action, happening in Germany this year. We have a memo on the Secretary General's Climate Summit happening in September of this year. And we have a few memos on our projects that we're working on as well. So please have a look at the folder we shared with you. I know it's a lot of documents.
Yeah, but they're only a couple of pages. Huh?
Yeah,
A 2-page
we made them as short as possible, but packed full of information that all of you can certainly benefit from. So if you have any questions, we'll be around, so feel free to talk to us. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks a lot. So now is when we're going to try to make sure that technology is on our side, okay? So Nicola is going to help us with the technology.
We have to wait.
We have to wait? We have to wait a few moments. So what is happening now, perhaps?
So I am really pleased to introduce our next speaker, who's coming to us via video feed, Carrie Constable from the Executive Office of the UN Secretary General. She'll be speaking to us about the Climate Summit in September, I believe. Really excited to have her presenting to all of us and sharing about some of what we can expect to see coming. Nicola, you will tell us when she's joining us. Yeah. I was looking at her bio and was interested to see that she's also a photographer who's very interested in the global visual narratives of environmental sustainability, which I was really taken with that as someone who in my work is thinking a lot about how do you shift narratives around issues of sustainability and mobilizing people to action. If we're not ready, then I can.
She says yes on WhatsApp, so you're looking forward to seeing her pop in.
Connecting.
So while we wait, well, at the same time, let's not open a full discussion here. But I see.
Well, we didn't introduce our board yet, so I was
yeah,
thinking we could do that. We have a couple of minutes. Yeah.
Go ahead. Sure.
Okay. I wanted to recognize all the board members that we have here in person. We had a few others on the phone today, but if you are a board member of SLoCaT and you stand up, that would be wonderful. And just really quickly, if you wouldn't mind just saying your names, like let's go around.
Don't start with me.
Oh,
I did it already.
we've already met. Armin and Holger. And
yeah, Armin Bach.
Margarita.
Clarice from ITDP Brazil.
And earlier today we had Sheila from FIA.
We had Katia Araujo from Landesa.
We had Jorge and
Jorge
from CAF, or formerly
and
CAF.
yeah,
Nicholas is with us as well.
And Gita was waiting for a while.
Yes. So we had global participation from our board, and I just really again want to thank you for everyone for participating in most of the day meeting and then being here tonight. So
how are we doing? How are we doing? We need the IT on our side.
As soon as the link.
She's having a bit of, we ran that test with her, but you know that these things are always a bit tricky. Why did we want to bring her on board? Well, basically she was going to join us, but then last minute logistics, all the trips she's got next week, snow, didn't allow her to join us here today. But these summits of the Secretary General only occur every 2 years. They can be a bit difficult to understand in the sense that what is the difference that summit can make compared to the other milestones that we have in the climate process? Why is it different to a UNFCCC process, or why is it different to a high-level political forum? So I have asked Carrie to share with us in 10 minutes, not more, what is this summit all about? What is it? What can it be expected out of it? How does it help us to focus strategic lead? And what is the space for the transport community in it, and what is the space for our partnership in it? And that's what Kerry was going to share with us rather briefly. I know that she had a difficulty in being coming in at the point we want her initially in the agenda because she was meeting directly this afternoon. So do I need to, fill up more time, or are we gonna do that? What do you think, Nicola? I keep on talking. It was fine. It's easy, but
Like a minute.
a minute. Where is she? Where is she? So
She's joining.
she's joining.
She's about to join.
Excellent.
She has arrived.
I am not very sure whether we would have the opportunity of asking her questions or not, but we have a very direct connection with her, which means that if we don't have the opportunity to just pass on to us the questions as a secretariat, we will make sure that as part of the minutes and the follow-up to this meeting, we will be able to respond to those questions. What I can tell you is that the next months are going to be a lot of work for us to make sure that the transport community can make the most out of it. And there she is, Carrie. Thanks a lot. Yeah. So thank you. I don't know if you can see us, Carrie. I know you probably can see Nicola. Now, can we hear you?
You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Can you please unmute?
I'm sorry, everyone. I can't see anyone. But if you can see and hear me, then I can hear you.
Perfect. So go ahead. Thank you very much for joining us in what I know has been quite a hectic day ahead of a hectic week and another week of travel afterwards. I was just telling our members why did we want desperately to have you on the agenda, and how you're going to help us understand a bit what is this summit, or why is a summit of the SG different to a UNFCCC process, or what is it that it is different to a high-level political forum, and how do you think the summit of the SG can help us move strategically, in this quest for climate action, and perhaps last but not least, what is the place you see for the transport sector and for this SLoCaT partnership and the Transport Decarbonization Alliance and the many other members involved in this summit? I don't know how much time you have, so I've already mentioned that perhaps we will not be. What I could do if we had any questions here and you couldn't stay longer would be that I would collect them and then pass them on to you, and via email we would continue. So over to you, Carrie, please, and take the time you have or the time you would like to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mushka, and greetings to everyone. I'm sorry I can't see you. And I had intended to be with you in person today, but unfortunately, this is one of the major weeks back in the office for many people, and we're building up the summit team, and it just was impossible to travel. So thank you for inviting me to join virtually. What I'll do is I'll just give a brief overview of the summit and the importance of transport, and then would be happy to receive any questions. The Climate Summit is being organized, obviously, in September 2019. The intention is that it will take place during the high-level week of the UN. So that's and it will take place just before the high-level political forum. The reason for the Climate Summit is to raise ambition across, on all of the sectors needed to really move the needle. So all of the sectors identified by the IPCC in its recent 1.5 report, we are hoping that we will have significant new commitments, measurable new commitments. But in addition, the importance of raising ambition on NDCs, getting more long-term strategies developed, will be a significant focus. So the reason for holding it in 2019 is because in 2020, as we all know, there will be many deadlines for different countries will have deadlines to ratchet up their commitments by COP26. And so the goal is to really mobilize member states at the highest of levels. It will be head of state level, and leaders, private sector leaders, subnational leaders, civil society leaders at the highest of levels to ensure that we are at a very different point by December 2019 than we were in December 2018. So that's the overarching goal. The summit will be organized along 9 areas. 3 areas are kind of quote unquote ambition related. So that will be kind of a national ambition track. Then social and political drivers, meaning health and climate and security. So those are the social and political drivers. And the third area in this ambition track is youth and public mobilization. And then there will be 6 real economy tracks. Those are resilience, climate finance, industry, which is cement, steel, energy transition, so renewables, energy efficiency, infrastructure, cities and local action. Infrastructure includes, and transport and buildings are the main areas that we are hoping for commitments. And then the 6th real economy area is nature-based solutions, and that is quite broad, which is oceans, agriculture, forestry, ensuring that deforestation, afforestation, food and climate link, and oceans, their plastics commitments are included. So all of that, I think, while transport will be addressed concretely in the infrastructure area, what we're hoping is that transport is also part of some of the other areas. Obviously, energy is critical for strong transport commitments, as in ambition and nationally determined contribution. Obviously, every country needs to have very ambitious transport commitments, targets, and also implementation plans. So so transport, we do hope, is more of a cross-cutting area, but with our goal to mobilize a package of transport commitments, which I'll get to in a bit, we will be organizing it as a key part of infrastructure. And how do we change the way in which infrastructure is built, managed, developed, financed? So I'll get to the importance of transport. We all know that transport is one of the major causes of emissions in many countries and many cities. It's the largest I'm losing my words at close to 7 p.m. But one of the largest reasons for its high emissions. So I think what we're quite interested in is whether the transport community can mobilize to develop a package of new commitments. A package might look like new financing and also commitments by CEOs in tandem with heads of state on transforming certain sectors. Freight vehicles has been mentioned by you, Marushka, and also the co-chair of TDA. That's quite interesting. Clearly shipping, quite interesting. So what we're looking for is really a package of really, ideally, if at all possible, unprecedented transport commitments that can be developed over the next 8 months. We have spoken with Transport Decarbonization Alliance about leading this mobilization of transport actors. As the chair of the TDA or the secretariat, we are really looking forward to working with SLoCaT in that capacity. So I'm hoping you are all looking forward to working with us. And just to be clear on just a couple of questions you had, Marushka, that I didn't address is, the difference between the climate summit and the HLPF or some of the other meetings that are taking place in September. this is not a member state driven process. So there is not a, this hasn't been deemed by a resolution. I mean, this is very much in Secretary General Climate Summit. He has called on this. He is mobilizing heads of state for this summit. And the reason why is because we need to get to a completely different state of the world and state of economy to bend the emissions curve. And he has made that climate, it's very clearly one of his main priorities. And but what's interesting about the climate summit is that it has a little bit more flexibility than some traditional member state processes. And so that's where some of the commitments may be able to be more multi-stakeholder than you may see in other processes. And so that's what's quite, I think quite interesting about the transport sector being able, and SLoCaT being able to engage member states, private sector, civil society, cities, etc. There is we're not limited by rules of engagement necessarily, but other than making sure that anything that comes to the summit will need to have very high levels of ambition and high levels of impact. Also goes without saying, high levels of inclusivity. So we're really looking for commitments to be as inclusive as possible and as ambitious as possible. So I'll stop there and would love to open it up to questions if you all have time.
Thank you so much, Mary. I know it's difficult as well to give all this information in just a minute. I'm looking to my members here. Perhaps we can just take that one critical question that I would see pop up in the room. In the interest of time and knowing that with Kerry we'll continue this conversation. Of course, Kerry, thank you very much, for reaching out to us as Secretary of the TDA and as SLoCaT partnership. We are clearly keen on working with you and on helping mobilize the sector. But again, in the room, any question, any immediate urge to ask? I see Amy here. If there's nobody, no? Amy, wait, Shane, I'll go to you then. Yeah.
So much of the international so far at the OECD. So I'm curious in terms of what kind of expectations do you have for the transport community, for all of our organizations here, all of the SLoCaT partners, and what are the outputs, some of the outputs from this specific event, and how is this linked to COP later this year?
Should I take a couple of questions and then come back? Marisha, it's up to you.
I'm very sure we have a lot of time for that. That's why I also want hand popping up. So I'm being a bit of a dictator here. It's like we're taking this one and that's it.
Okay, no worries, no worries. So in terms of expectations, we're expecting everyone, as much as possible, the transport community to mobilize for this moment. I mean, as I mentioned, what's unique for the climate summit is that it is one of the major climate events, if not the major climate event of the year, at the highest of levels. And the reason why it's both of those things is because, as we all know, I mean, we are not on track. All of the reports from 2018 indicated that. And the Secretary General and his office has deemed that it is necessary to bring together climate leaders at the highest of levels together with heads of state to move that needle. And the expectations would be that the transport community mobilizes for that event. Over the next 8 months, I mean, the work starts now. It's not, it is a very different event from what you would normally see at the UN. There won't be side events. The speakers will be announcing new commitments. So it's not, a place where, the latest, maybe the latest science will be announced, but there won't be long discussions about kind of the state of affairs. It really will be a commitment delivery summit. So the expectation is that the transport community mobilizes to bring that. And the outputs are also that. The outputs are new commitments. The difference between a summit like this at head of state level and the COP is that, again, this is not a member state process. So this is not to move forward negotiations. There are, the UNFCCC has a very well-oiled, incredible machine on negotiations that yielded, incredible, very, a difficult to achieve Paris rulebook recently. They'll be negotiating on the market mechanisms this year. That is something that I know very little about, and I will not know much more about it in 1 year's time. That is not what our focus is. Our focus is not negotiations. It will not be negotiations for the climate summit. It is very concretely on moving the real economy, moving key sectors, and making sure that we are capturing the incredible mobilization of key sectors, with transport being one of the absolute top sectors that just need to mobilize at an unprecedented level to deliver outputs. So that's, I hope that clarifies the difference.
Thank you very much, Carrie. Thanks sincerely for having made the effort, You and I and many of the colleagues here in the room will continue the conversation months, if not already next week, certainly. So thank you very much. I think we're going to release you and just rendezvous in a couple of days. I'm pretty sure to follow up on all this conversation. So thank you very much for joining us, Carrie. Bye-bye.
Okay. Of course, take care.
So now I think I bring it back to my chair, Amy.
So we have one final exercise. This is the participatory part, where we will go deeper than your favorite mode of transport. And this is the last exercise before we break for the reception, which I know we're all looking forward to. So we're going to break out, we're going to have table breakouts, and I will assign numbers to each table. You'll see we have 2 questions for discussion. Question number 1, what should be the strategic objectives for the SLoCaT partnership over this 4-year time horizon? As Marisha pointed out earlier, we'll be developing that sort of 4-year strategic plan. Question 2, what should the SLoCaT partnership, including the Secretariat and its members, all of you, do to increase our impact? What new activities and approaches can we see? And what should we stop doing? Also a really important question. So this, I'm going to break us up by tables. Do you have a question?
No, just a comment. Sorry, Darío Hidalgo, Carlos Rice, that's on this party. I just heard Jaime Letter say something that I find it really, really striking, and I want him to share it with the whole group.
Very quickly.
It's very short.
Could you share the reception?
Okay.
Take us off? Yeah, just to keep us on track. I promise people to get us to the reception on time. But then, yes, we'll have a moment. So just to break us out by tables, you will answer question 1, question 2, question 1, question 2, question 1 at Holger and Winnie's table, question 2 in the back. We're going to break into the tables. The SLoCaT staff is going to get around to the different tables and help facilitate and also take notes of your discussion. This is really important input as we launch into the strategic planning refinement process. When the staff members at your table feel that we've really discussed this, maybe filled out some more stickies, they have sufficient information, we will release you to the reception, and then you will hear from Michael, one of the SLoCaT Foundation co-founders, and also a couple of other remarks. Okay, so break.
Question 2.